Wow, okay, well, thanks everybody so much for being here. This is amazing. I guess I should do I need to introduce everybody, or should we just move forward, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So my name's Travis Shakespeare. I'm the director of Playing with Fire, the first ever documentary about our community. Thank you. Scott Rieckens, my partner, and one of the stars of the film is here as well. So I thought, just quickly. Exactly.
Did you have the wide angle?
I thought just briefly I would kind of give you guys a little bit of background on how the film came to pass. My own story goes back over a decade. I am one of the fire community. My father died when I was 40 years old, and I was in a lot of debt. I had $40,000 of student loans at 9% interest, locked in for life, because I was told that was the lowest interest rate I would ever see in my entire life. I knew nothing about money. I'm not good with math. I don't know how to do spreadsheets, but I'm a storyteller. And I decided to go to Chautauqua. Pete was there, and Brandon, JL, and Jeremy from Go Curry Cracker. And I was so impressed by two things. One was just the sheer intelligence and generosity of this community, which is just mind-boggling, very rare, very special. And the other was that in the Chautauqua itself, we had a day dedicated to community service. And I realized that the fire subculture was up to something more than just becoming rich. And that there's an active thread of generosity and give back in the community that's really admirable. So after I got home and my life was changing and I was following all the tips and tricks of the fire community, I started asking myself, how can I give back? Is there anything that I can do to contribute to this conversation? And not being a math person, but being a storyteller, I decided that my contribution would be to bring this to film as a documentary. So I called everybody and I said, hey, if I do a documentary, will you be in it? And they were like, absolutely. And then I still have a day job. I work in Hollywood at the BBC, and I was launching a new version of Top Gear for the US market. And my plans got completely waylaid because doing a full-time job and also directing a movie on the side is a lot. And about a year later, I heard Scott on the Choose FI podcast, and I was like, oh no, this guy's doing my movie. I was like, this is terrible. And so I had one sleepless night, and then I thought, I'm just gonna call him. I'm just gonna reach out. And I did, and I was flying through Seattle, and he was there with Taylor, his wife, and we had really bad dim sum. And we shared our stories and our vision about the film, and what was really incredible was I had done quite a bit of work in terms of creating a storyboard, a story look, and a narrative of what it would all look like. And when I showed it to Scott, it was almost the exact same as the one that he was creating himself. So the synergy was mind-boggling, and it's been an amazing partnership since. We've filmed over the course of a full year, across 4 seasons, about a dozen different cities, in order to tell this remarkable story of the community that you guys and these people here are building. So that's a little bit about that.
So today I decided to call up so many people that it filled the stage, and hopefully everybody's fairly comfortable. But I wanted to start a discussion on sort of the present situation going on with fire. It seems like there's something going on, and maybe I'm in the bubble, maybe I'm not, and that's part of the discussion that I want to facilitate. And then I want to know, what does that mean for the future of fire? What does that mean for this community, and what does it mean for all the people that could potentially benefit from this community? So we thought that'd be a fun discussion to have, and we want to thank you guys all for being here. This is amazing. And so, yeah, I'd just like to open it up and say, if anyone has an opinion specifically on the current state of fire, the media that's starting to sort of buzz and generate. I know you guys are recipients of that in a lot of ways. You end up in those articles and all these TV whatever segments. And I'm wondering how it affects you guys and what you see and how you're protecting your brand or the fire subculture, what you think media wants out of that story. Doug, do you have something?
I have an opinion. Yeah, I know. Shock. The FIRE acronym, we need to stop using that. I think we're done with FIRE. It was cool 20 years ago in 1998 when the Trinity study came out, but I think we're done with that and we just need to focus on financial independence. By now it's becoming clear that I'm the only person left on the face of the planet who is not finding a job or finding some way to earn income after reaching financial independence. Is there anybody out here who thinks the FIRE acronym needs to stay around? Because I see lots of people complaining about it. You like the idea of FIRE? Okay.
I came in a long time ago, and it's part of me.
All right. I think many people who are complaining about the need to work after financial independence are people who hate their job and might need a career change, but that doesn't mean that you are not financially independent.
Please wait till the movie comes out.
I have a question about that though, Doug, because
I want to lead on this issue.
so, part of the thesis of the FIRE movement is that you can save enough money to never have to work again, and yet everybody continues to work. Why?
Well, my theory is that in order to reach FI, you have to self-select as somebody who is ambitious, and that type of ambition does not disappear the moment that you have FI. Now, it's possible that you might channel that into something that is non-income producing. Perhaps you channel it into becoming a trapeze artist or speaking fluent Korean, but for most people, they end up expressing it in a way that ends up happening to earn an income.
I bet if somebody here learned to be fluent in Korean, they would find a way to make money doing it.
Yeah.
I know a Korean translator. So.
There you go.
I was always also against the FIRE acronym, but I maybe did the opposite as you. I always just called it early retirement because I think I hate acronyms because I think they turn people off and they make it sound like, a little business boardroom meeting. But you'd still disagree with me because I say early retirement. And I just say that because it's it's like a marketing phrase and it makes people get attention. They're like, oh, well, I hate my job. I wouldn't mind retiring. And like later on, you can explain to them, well, really, you're going to keep working and doing stuff that's fun. But that's too many leaps. That's too many leaps. They can't imagine this. First, you have to let them be free from whatever job they don't like. And then you can say, by the way, you're not allowed to just like watch TV or take escalators or use the golf cart.
I think increasingly we have the power of controlling the messaging on what this means for all of us going to the future. It's really incredibly powerful. Probably even 5 years ago, we would say something and the mainstream media would take that and spin it to kind of make this straw man figure, which is obviously something that's very easy to criticize. But over time, the messaging's gotten very polished. It's gotten very diverse. It kind of what this is about is this freedom, this flexibility, this option to choose the life that appeals to you and get that control back so much earlier in your life. So many people are okay with giving you permission to do whatever you want after the age of 65, but to retire from a corporate job that doesn't light you up in your 30s, I mean, that's something that, I don't know if you can do that. You need to follow the safe standard narrative. And I think, by the way, how will you be able to enjoy the level of consumption that we have if you take this alternate path? So I think that what we've been able to do over time is kind of move the messaging a little bit and talk about, it's not what are you retiring from, it's what are you retiring to, which inevitably changes the discussion and changes what retirement actually means. And so, I don't know if it's fire. I think it's largely irrelevant. What's more powerful is the fact that with this community of people that increasingly is finding a growing audience, it's no longer just the mainstream that's telling us who we are. We're saying who we are, and the mainstream's like, wow. And that's a pivot, that's a change. This New York Times article that came out compared to maybe a New Yorker article that came out several years ago, it's insane how friendly that was.
Is the mainstream saying wow?
Well, yes.
I think so. I don't know what the mainstream is.
I feel like, so my question is the mainstream actually saying wow? And I think in a lot of time, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, there's a lot of criticism, and that's a large part because they don't understand. I understand that. But there are some people that are critical of it, and especially critical about the motives and stuff.
Yeah, I'll just say, like, we were talking about this last week. When the mainstream controls the headline and the clickbaity title, that really skews the messaging. So that's why something like this documentary is exciting, because it's the actual people that are doing this stuff.
And are we talking about I'm talking about not the media itself necessarily, so much as the people who are consuming the media. And so they're the ones, I think, that are not saying wow. They're the ones that are skeptical. They're the ones that are, and I'm hoping that the movie can help change the skepticism. And I mean, I haven't seen the movie, obviously. I hope it shows that, no, we're just real, regular people. But I know even in my own life, when I talk about this with friends and people, they're like, yeah, this is, well, we've talked about this a lot. It's just for rich people. It's just for, it's not for me.
But I would say, I would almost interpret that as a good sign. Like, if the pushback is strong, that means there's an impact. The worst possible response would be apathy. So if there's strong resistance, I mean, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. If there's strong resistance, that means there's strong acceptance on the other end.
So we need the haters.
So we need the haters. Yeah.
All press is good press.
As Pete has demonstrated, we need the haters. Yeah.
What about this notion of retirement generally, though? JD, you've done a lot of research and thought about this. I mean, it seems to me that the conversation generally that I see in the media around retirement is shifting anyway. Like, it almost feels like it's being thrown out. People are saying, Susie Orman was like, you have to work until you're 95, right? Like, don't ever stop working. And that's becoming a very common thread in the mainstream. Do you guys see that happening? Yeah.
Are you talking about like you can't afford to retire, or are you talking about like
Security.
Oh, okay, so we're all too afraid to retire. Okay, I haven't noticed. I mean, I know that some people go that way.
And it's just the media. I mean, Pete and I have talked about this a lot, especially with Jim. The media, they're not showing reality. They're showing you fringe cases. It's a bell curve. They're showing you both ends of the bell curve. They want to stir things up. Well, you and I just talked about that this morning, and I see why you're asking the question.
What I do?
So yeah, the media is just trying to get fringe cases instead of reporting on the quiet middle. I mean,
I guess, sorry. My question, JD, to you would be, how do you interpret the interest? So like the New York Times article, for instance, we've heard it was the most popular article on the site for 5 to 7 days. Like, how do you interpret that personally?
Well, interesting question, Brad.
That's all I'm here for.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, part of it is it's a controversial thing. It's a new idea. And for a lot of people, it is a new idea that they've never heard of before. And so it becomes intriguing. And as you, Jonathan, and I have discussed, I worry that we could be, I feel like we're maybe in a FIRE bubble or a financial independence bubble. And that I've been doing this for a while now, and I look at 10 years ago, there was a frugality bubble, and that's kind of a reflection of the economy, right? We were in a situation where people couldn't really think about financial independence as much. They were more worried about just getting by, and so frugality was all the rage. Right now, we're in an economic boom, and so there's more money flowing around, and it's very possible for more people to become financially independent as the stock market and as the real estate market are growing. And so I worry that, as I told Jonathan, that we're at peak FIRE is what I call it. And I know Jonathan has some opinions on that.
No thoughts, no thoughts. Yeah, I think that there were a lot of millionaires that were made in 2008 through 2012 because of the reactions that they made. So I think the tone of the group that we have with 26,000 people in it will shift. And I can't speak to the larger population. I'm going to infer the data from my group to the larger community. I think the tone will shift from high five, I'm a millionaire for the first time, to more, you're getting your stocks for 60% off. You're getting your stocks for, the market's going to crash. It is going to crash at some point. No one here is telling you the date, but at some point we're going to have a 20 or 30% drop. It will happen eventually if we wait long enough. But I think at that point the tone of the group shifts from high five to, man, I remember when this happened in 2008, and because I did this, this, and this, the best thing that ever happened to me. Keep in mind that the vast majority of the community are people that identify, quote unquote, as aspiring early retirees. Regardless of whether they choose to execute on that or not, they still like the idea that they're thinking about this long before traditional retirement. So this scary window of what could happen now, what could happen 5 years from now, we have the privilege, I guess, of being in this massive accumulation phase right now. And regardless of what the market does, if the market does great for the next 5 years, amazing. If the market tanks next year, I know plenty of people that maybe reserve this a little bit, but are thinking, amazing. I've been keeping all this cash on the sideline. I've been keeping all this. It's a buying opportunity. So I think the community, the messaging is so full of optimism. We have a play either way. And in terms of peak fire, I mean, if you're saying frugality, it's kind of a one-dimensional turn. I'm just going to hold on to everything, right? If you say, I want to get to financial independence, you're talking about, I'm going to earn more, I'm going to spend less, I'm going to optimize the difference. What do I want my life to be? How does that ever become dated? Like, really? So I think that there's zero chance that there will peak. I think it may spread, the word may not be FI, but like, in what universe are you going to be embarrassed talking about that to someone else?
The truth is probably somewhere in between. I'll have to.
Okay.
I want to go back to the emotional part of financial independence. That's my field is looking at the emotional side of this. And personally, as I've approached financial independence, I've found a very ironic thing, which goes back to what you said, Paula, which is that in a weird way, nothing has changed in my life. You know, I can go onto my Vanguard account and I see the dollars there, but it doesn't really do anything because I've followed the principles that have been put out by all you guys, and I'm living the same life that I've lived for the past 20 years, you know, but I'm rich. And in a weird way, it doesn't even matter. I've had this weird feeling that, like, why did I even do this? Because I'm the same person now that I was the day that I started, and being an industrious person and a motivated person, maybe I just needed to accept that part of myself, and money didn't matter. Thoughts?
Oh, I have.
Oh, I completely agree. Yeah. Pete, you released an article, I don't know, maybe a couple months ago, like about confidence, and if you had more confidence, you don't need as much money. And I realized that that's like sums me up perfectly, because I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I was too big of a wuss to do it. So I was like, oh, I'll reach FI, and then that way I'm set, and then it doesn't matter if I fail. And then I reach FI, and then I realized that making more money doesn't matter. So then I was like, I'm a wussy artist now. So yeah, had it been more confidence that I could have just done these things earlier. And you're right, yeah, the number on the screen is just so meaningless to me, and I can't even understand it. So like, happiness didn't change, nothing changed. What started changing was when I started doing things that I said I always wanted to do. And that goes back to the whole why people who are retired do stuff, is because we've realized consumption of goods and services doesn't really make us happy. And the same thing with culture and information and things. So you realize, like, oh, it's more fun to write a blog than it is to read it. And it's more fun to make music than listen to it, and play sports than. So you realize that, yeah, production's more important than consumption, and that's why you end up making more money after you quit your job, I think.
Maybe we should call it financially independent, overly productive.
So we actually haven't achieved FI or financial independence yet. I don't want to get Doug mad, but I would question.
Closer than you think.
Yeah, he's like nudging me right here. But I think a little differently about what you just said. And you may say that you haven't changed, you don't feel any different. But I think that question is really for the people that you are most around, right? And so I can tell you, as we've even gotten closer to that point, and my wife has told me I've become less and less employable. I was a pain in the butt to my manager, right? Because I felt freer, to your point, every time I look at my account. And so become significantly less tolerable of BS because of that freedom. And so just a thought.
No, I agree with you. I mean, even doing this film in a funny way, like, I probably shouldn't say this publicly, but I don't, like, all that I care about is just that the film gets out there. That's all that I care about. And that is the exact measure of success. Whether or not 5 or 500 or 500 million people watch it, in a weird way, doesn't matter. And I think that that's because I'm financially independent. Yeah. If I really needed, you know, that extra cash coming in, I might not have that same attitude. Now, on the confidence side, the cool thing about that is that it allows you to take risks.
Yes.
And typically, if you take great risks, you have great reward. So, I don't know.
That's been a nice equilibrium for our partnership because I am not financially independent either, and I am very much a beginner in this entire framework. And it reminds me of a story that we've told a few times about the process of filming this. Is that on one hand, in front of the cameras, you've got this unbelievable information share going on. You're learning things that you could have never imagined. You're tying those things that you're learning in the moment with the cameras rolling to your background, and I'm having epiphanies, and this is personal. I'm having epiphanies, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm learning about my relationship with money. I'm learning about my upbringing and how that's affected who I am and the communication styles that I have with my wife, and all these things are going off. And we hit stop, and the audio guy in the background goes, oh, I just paid off my student loans. This is amazing. Wow. Our crew has been completely transformed by this. One guy showed up and he's like, yeah, I just read Your Money or Your Life. I was like, in one day? Oh my goodness. People have been truly affected by this who've touched it. And so for me, getting to your point and to be in the mindset of a beginner as opposed to an expert level, from a beginner standpoint, it was fear that actually stopped me from being financially literate. It was fear that stopped me from investing smartly because my fear mechanism turned into a big excuse, which was, well, I'm really busy. I've got all this stuff going on, and I need to focus on my career, and geez, investing seems like this unbelievable thing I cannot grasp. It's going to take me a master's degree worth of time to really understand it, and even then it seems like everybody tells me the stock market's a big gamble anyway, so maybe I'll just buy a house and feel good about that, and we'll save a bunch of money and it'll sit there. Once I found FIRE, once I found Pete's blog first and totally absorbed it, and then moved on and found all the people through the FIRE community and pulled these little pieces out that just totally resonated with me, I started formulating, how am I going to get my wife on board with this? And so all those things were happening, and I think that's the beauty of the FIRE framework to me, and why I respectfully disagree with you, Doug, is that when we had to really think about what we were going to name this, playing with FIRE was very intentional. And the reason was because I'm not saying that it's working. I'm not saying that it's going to work for us. So there was like a semblance of we're dipping our toes in the water. But also, I noticed that everybody was trying to figure out what to call it when I was reading through everything. Is it FI? Is it FI-ER? Is it FIRE? Is it Fat Fire? Lean Fire? Barista Fire? Holy cow, guys, hang on. I'm just learning about index funds. And so one of the things that happened to me, though, was very quickly I got very dogmatic about the life-changing powers of this. Whether or not it was actually working for me and my family at that moment, we hadn't made one financial move yet, but I could see my relationship with money changing inside my mind, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is what I've been feeling, but I've let lifestyle creep hit, and I really want to bring that to as many people as I can. I already feel like I want to pay this forward. And so for when we were coming up with that title, it was, well, FIRE is actually really convenient, It actually starts a discussion, because I completely disagree with the retire early part. I'm an ambitious guy, and I'm probably going to be working till I die. But I think there's this beautiful hook there, and I think it's get rich and retire early. And most people are like, oh, please. And what I believe in is that they'll eventually get through to the other side and say, oh, it's really not about that. And I still feel much better than I did before. And I see a lot of people nodding their heads, and I think a lot of us agree with that. And so anyway, I've been talking way too long. I'm going to stop doing that.
Yeah. Questions. So I got a couple of questions about the community in general. You guys have done great work with the blogs, the resources. I mean, basically all the information is out there, right? And it's been told a number of different ways at this point. Is there something that the community is thinking about as like its next mantelpiece? Like, is it just going to keep going like this for another 30 years, where we're just constantly writing about the 4% rule and so on? Or is there something else that the community has the capacity to affect broadly?
Everybody wants to know how I'm going to raise the next generation of fire young adults. And that's been a common enough theme. You saw it come up at Camp FI Southeast with me, that's probably the next thing I'm going to start writing about is how to raise a money smart kid.
Can I put one in there too? So I have a personal goal, even though it might sound a little bit out of left field, but my intention from the very start of this blogging thing is like start getting people interested in their own self-interest, which means early retirement. But then the secret is you're not really going to retire, but you're going to do more ethical work using all this freed up brain power. And then you turn that back in at the system. All these liberated people come back and start making our dumb system more efficient too, like voting in a more intelligent way. And even like changing stuff like our urban planning, like especially in the US, because like right now we're designing this whole country around like really, really wasteful things that are bad for human nature. Like we're all separating ourselves by concrete and cars. And there's huge money involved in that. Like there's huge money waste and huge time waste. And I think if we change the way we live, we would also change the way we lay out the country, and then we would save like all these trillions of dollars, and we'd have better relationships with each other, which would make us watch less TV, and then we'd be closer as a community, and we'd vote in a more logical way, and we'd like consume a lot less crap too. So like the entire country could be like swirled up into this much more utopian place, but it all starts with people not being like debt slaves or consumption slaves. So that's kind of like a bigger, long game that I was hoping happens. Like I don't really give, as I said in another talk, I don't give that much of a shit about people's personal finances. I really care about the better world that we can all get to live in if we are better with our money.
Have you sorted through what like a first actionable step is? I mean, there's, you know, like becoming not a wage slave is at least a 10-year process for most people.
Yeah, so your first
minimum.
step is riding a bike.
Bravo.
Just keep it simple. Once you're doing that, I'll tell you what to do next.
Okay. Who else has what on that topic?
Oh, thanks.
I got you.
I think selfishly, I'd like to see more Black people participating in the fire community. And brown and yellow,
Yeah.
people of color. I think we are drivers of culture. A lot of the principles of fire we've been taught, we were brought up that way. They were just framed as survival or resourceful. And to know that you can continue in the things that brought you joy in childhood through adulthood and actually use that as a tool instead of a sob story, a tool to get wealthy and, to Pete's point, to go and do amazing social change is something that I think we're ready for. Closing the wealth gap is something that I think will make everybody better. So.
And how, absolutely. We talked about this a bit when I was doing your guys' interview for the film, but for the group here, I mean, like, how do you do that? How do you affect that change? Like, what's your first step in the Black community, or, you know?
Yeah, I mean, our first step, honestly, was to blog not anonymously. We wanted everybody to know that we are Black, always been Black my whole life. We live in Atlanta, and so not blogging behind a pseudonym was really important to us, and to give people an example, you know, that they can follow. There wasn't really a roadmap or a blueprint of people who encounter unique cultural experiences and weren't reaffirmed in their experience with money. And so what we wanted to do was just kind of open the conversation and talk more about it from our point of view. But I think from here, it's really just about amplifying our voice and, you know, being in forums like this with you all where we get a chance to just kind of talk about our perspective is really helpful.
Awesome. And I have noticed, I mean, because I've been coming to FinCon for like 5 years now, and there's definitely been an increase of people of color generally. Yeah. I think there's even a gay person here besides me. A few gay people, okay, see me later. So I'm flying the rainbow flag, but you know, yeah, it's good. Who else?
Yeah, to me, it's all about the community, right? And just seeing, 200 people in this room? How many of you guys feel like islands unto yourself in your daily life? Yeah, probably a lot of you. But I think having this idea normalized and seeing it in the New York Times, seeing it that you can send it to a friend or just to talk to them. I think, we've tried with our Choose If I Think to have these local groups. And, we had people come from all across Florida yesterday to be here. And it's nice to share those ideas, just to know that you're not in this by yourself, right? So I think to me, growing the community and just telling friends, telling family, I know just in my own little life, like I talk about this on the show all the time, so I'm sorry, but at like my pool and my CrossFit gym, it's like people are spreading it themselves. I've talked to a couple people and then they'll listen to the podcast or read Pete's blog or all of our blogs and they want to share it. And it's amazing, like I'm not proselytizing here, like it's not me, it's just they want to share it, right? And I think we all have, I don't know, some type of, not obligation, that's a terrible word, but like, let's see this movie become a success, Like to me, we don't ask much none of us ask anything of you guys, the community, other than to be involved, but go to the Kickstarter page and give $5, right? Like, Scott's not gonna ask, but I'm gonna ask. Like, do it. Just give $5 and show that it means something to you, right? So
get your phones out now.
Yeah.
Right.
Hopefully he has a short code set up, but
While you're
I'm
at
not
it,
sure.
ask for like 25
Yeah,
instead of 5.
well, sure. Maybe $100, but start with 5. So.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's multiple things there in terms of things that kind of make all of us a little bit nervous. One of them is the where jobs headed, where industry, we know there's a lot of jobs that are just kind of disappearing. There are a lot of wages that just seem to be deflating when inflation is obviously rising. I think what we see is, honestly, selfishly, the gig economy is great for people pursuing financial independence. It's actually the best thing that could happen because you get to control your environment, you get to pick your hours. Once you're getting closer on the other side, to have that much work available, but to help someone that's 16 or 17 years old and have their parents who went heavily in debt and just think that that's what you have to do. The world is drastically changing, and if you buy into this old paradigm of what it means to get an above median income job, you may wake up in your 30s and say, wow, I'm still digging my way out. And you're really on this path to fight once you get rid of the debt. Now we're talking about this 10-year path. So when Doug talks about second generation, yeah, it's great to talk about the 6, 7, 8-year-old, but like these 18, 19-year-olds or these kids that are about to go to college for the first time, starting to have dialogue and talking about things like career hacking, right? We love to hack stuff, career hacking, and knowing that jobs and opportunities change over time, really highlighting those opportunities, helping people figure out, how do I get to that median income? What are these alternatives? I was very blindsided. I just went to Google and typed in top 10 professions, and it was one of those, well, just do whatever you have to do, take on as much debt as you need to get that thing. That is just simply not a winning strategy for someone pursuing this path if they have been exposed to it earlier. So when this is our documentary, this is our chance to share this with our friends, our family members, our nephews and nieces. If we can put this in front of them, they're going to start thinking about these questions, and at every point in their life, it's going to be useful for them. They're going to have this intentional game plan, and it'll help them where they are. So it plants that seed.
Yeah, thank you. The intention of the film is to challenge the standard notion of the way people relate to their financial lives. We're not trying to rehash all the math and all that stuff. I don't think anybody wants to watch a movie about that anyway. But, well, you do, but,
You can change the title to the 4%.
The 4% rule. But similar to the sound guy that paid off his student loans in an interview, the guy that cut the film trailer that we showed you, I put the movie in front of him, and I walked into the edit bay 20 minutes later, and he was on his phone. I said, how's it going? He said, dude, I gotta get my shit together. And what I love about that is that it makes people uncomfortable. Like the film, even 20 minutes in, regular people start feeling uncomfortable. The fire community, the financial services community, you guys aren't gonna feel super uncomfortable because this is your world, but our job is to get the people who wouldn't normally gravitate toward your work to come to it. That's the whole point of the film.
One thing that's come up with my, I guess, with a lot of the conversations that I've had around this, well, two things. One has been that you can be financially free, but until you heal your like emotional junk, you're not actually ever free. And so, but if you look at money almost as a symbol or a like, if managing your money is a microcosm of just managing your greater life, then I think one of the things that can come out of the FIRE movement, and one of the question, like to your earlier question of like what else is on the mantle next, is that relationship between like fix your money, but in the process of doing so, fix your entire emotional life and your mental life. And Emma and I were talking about this on a recent podcast episode. Like there's the Maslow hierarchy of needs, and because it's shaped like a pyramid, you look at the top of the pyramid and you're like, oh, it's such a tiny little thing. I'm gonna knock self-actualization out, like done. Gonna get that one over with in like 20 minutes.
Cherry on top.
Exactly, exactly. And like, you know, that pyramid is not drawn to scale. Like it's, it's an inverted pyramid. And I think that that's a big part of what's gonna come out of the discussions about FIRE in the future, is that your relationship with money, as you were talking about, Scott, is in many ways it's symbolic of your relationship with your greater life.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the money part's the easy part, definitely. Like that's what I found over the last 2 years of not having a job and thinking that my life would be perfect after I hit this stupid number on a screen. So yeah, a lot of my writing's going to be about what I've been struggling through. And like I said, I was a wussy entrepreneur / wussy artist, and it's still hard to do those things even when you have all the time and money in the world. So yeah, that's definitely where I'm heading, because there's way more challenges still to come. It's great. It's like great to be able to think about these things and try to tackle these problems, because most people are just too busy to even care until maybe they're on their deathbed. But it's still tough. So yeah, it's really interesting as well.
I have all this great information about all the good things about the 4% safe withdrawal rate, and all people want to know about is life after financial independence.
What Brandon just said, that money's the easy part. I mean, that's radical. That's a radical statement in the current society. So if we can flip that and people can spend less time thinking about money and more time on themselves, I think the world will probably be a better place, because I know my neighbors will be happier, and then we can hang out more. That's the last thing I really want to touch on is when it comes to what's next. I think what we're trying to do with this film is kind of bring this whole framework. It's not in the shadows, but kind of bring it to the forefront. Show the emotional journey, and show that it's not necessarily easy. But I think it's something I've said since day one, which was this is all actually, I can't believe how simple this is, but that doesn't make it easy. And we want to show how that goes, and so we can try to eliminate as many excuses as we can for people. That's really what we're trying to do. And if we do that, I think that this framework is simple enough that people will start challenging themselves. That's why the subtitle of this project is "How Far Would You Go for Financial Freedom?" We tried our best to try to put that on the individual. It is an individual journey, and I think if we change those minds and we get there, and more people start feeling that freedom, I wonder what's next. And I wonder how everyone on the panel now, everyone in the room now, I wonder how we can come together to start that process, to take this seriously, and still have a lot of fun, of course, but to take it very seriously and say, how do we utilize this structure and this framework that has been created by amazing minds who have shared it for free? How do we use that? How do we organize that in a way that's easy to access? Because we are all probably, anybody who's here who's enjoying this are DIY. They like DIY. They're ambitious. They're down to get dirty. They want to get their hands dirty. They want to try this out. But I think a lot of people we're not meeting them where they are, if that's what we're saying you have to do, I think. And I'm not saying that it's not going to be a hard journey, but how do we make it as easy as possible for them to begin? Because a lot of people just want to say, like, oh, if that's true, then just please do it. So I'm interested in that, and I think if we can do that, we can gain more and more of a legitimacy on this framework. And then what do we do? And I think Pete started talking about it with urban planning and getting more involved in voting and things like that. I mean, you literally watch these news articles and are talking about the reason why people aren't coming out to vote is because they're too busy at work. And that's just so backwards, as we all know, and look what's happened. So, whoops. Just kidding, I don't care.
Best president ever.
But I'm really curious. Like again, I'm going to stop talking. I want to hear from you guys, the influencers and the heroes in my life, on what you think about when I start saying those things. Like, where does your mind go? What do you think we can do? What do you think the power is? And do you think there is that power? I'm all dogmatic about it, but maybe I'm misguided.
I'll throw one other thing on the table because it's very similar to what you're saying. And Vicki Robbins is the one that actually brought this up to me, which is, why doesn't the fire community take up the mantle of healthcare in the United States? It directly intersects, right? It directly intersects with our agenda and our needs, and is one of the primary problems with early retirement, if we're going to keep that acronym.
Well, I've emailed with Vicki about this, and the reason the early retirement community doesn't take it up is because the early retirement community is not unified politically. We're not all Democrats. I happen to hate the healthcare system in the United States. At Get Rich Slowly, I intentionally do not discuss politics in any way, but I make an exception for healthcare because I think it's bullshit what we've got. That said, Vicki has a very definite agenda, and I happen to agree with most of her agenda, but I never forget that there are other people who disagree with what I think. And so not everyone agrees that the healthcare system needs to be scrapped or changed.
Well, I think that, not to get too political about it, but I think that everybody agrees that the healthcare system in our country sucks.
I don't know that everyone does agree.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
I think more broadly that
Anybody here like the healthcare system?
I do think that most people do.
Yeah, really? Interesting.
I think more broadly, the first question is, do we or do we not, and this is genuinely a question, do we or do we not want to accept the principle of radical inclusion? And if we are radically inclusive, that means we must be inclusive of all political viewpoints. And that means that we as the fire community cannot be political.
Yeah, and I also think that over the tribalism that we've seen over the past 5 years is so profound, and the rift between the two factions, or I guess maybe there's more factions, but let's just say there's two sides. It's getting so deep, it's insane. Yet in this room, there are people on both sides of that rift that agree with each other on 97% of everything. And that's what I see with Brad. Brad and I are on other sides of this divide, but you know what we have? We have trust, and we agree with each other on everything. And I tell you what, it's healing. It brings you together. I don't think that you can rush to kind of give people labels. As soon as you start with a label of who they are, and frankly, I'll be honest with you, healthcare is one of those mantles. It's something that you find a reason to hate the other person because they don't agree with you on this. Politics is another one. And we have been presented this incredible opportunity to unite people and bring them together on common ground. What happens a few years from now when you have that trust and you can actually communicate with something first based on what you have in common? Brad can tell, we can have a dialogue now about politics. We're still very sensitive to each other's perspectives, but we see where each other's coming from. We can have that, but you don't start with that. And that's the problem. We are so caught up in 24-hour news cycles that tells us all the other reasons the other party wants to end the world, that how can you can't. So I think I think you're very right to be visionary. I think you're very right that if you're truly involved in a movement, that there will be profound effects, as Pete pointed out too, once it coalesces. But I think what we're seeing right now is trust. And I think what you guys have provided is a hook to massively increase the people that are willing to expose themselves to this level of inclusion that Paula is talking about.
Let's get to a more concrete example of universal health care. How many of you depend on TRICARE or the Veterans Administration health care? Raise your hand. What if you knew that that is the nation's best health care system? That's as good as it gets. I'll leave you with that thought. We can talk later.
So
but
it's
that's
good or bad?
That's what we're looking for with universal health care. TRICARE Prime is being considered, and TRICARE Select are being considered as the national model for universal health care.
Interesting. What about the sharing healthcare, which I'm not a part of, but those ministry share deals? Is that a model that's better?
Would I have to lead an honorable life and abide by someone else's?
No more swearing.
I will say that if you're interested, there are people in our community that are actively pursuing, can we do some version of that that has a level of radical inclusivity to it? There are options, and if you have a community of people, of like-minded individuals that are interested in doing some version of that, sharing each other's medical bills, there may be something there. It doesn't mean that we need to have that answer today. I also suspect that we're not going to be able to rely on corporations, but you do see interest from people that are highly respected, like Warren Buffett, saying, hey, is there a way that we can leverage our massive platform, our massive wealth, and do something that we know the government just can't pull off? I think most of us would be incredibly open to a private or public solution if we can just get a sense of how it would play out. In the meantime, though, you have politics poisoning the well. So I think a solution could either come from someone like those individuals just mentioned, or maybe there's a true opportunity where this movement spills out into every other aspect of our life. So I'm very excited about it. I don't want to rush to go there because right now we're still hooking people, right? But big things are going to happen in this community.
Yeah, I think it's worth thinking about now. I don't think we're there yet. One thing that I'm hearing that's really interesting, I'm drawing this parallel. Travis first brought it to my attention that this this is very akin to like the Puritan, right? Or the Quaker, or which one was it?
Well, so this is my thesis, right? So and I know other people have talked about this. I mean, you look all the way back to like the Puritans and also Walden, Henry David Thoreau. There was a strand of austerity, frugality, simplicity that is part of the American experience, right?
Right, and so.
But then there's the bohemian side as well.
Yes, we're having fun with that too. But like, if you look at the Constitution, it's like we the people, and it's in pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And you think about that. You think about the parallels that the FIRE community draws. It's really, really interesting that we're it's almost like we're declaring that we want to go back to what the best plan we've ever seen really was. I think that's interesting. Like,
Not too far
is that too far? Did I mess up there? Do you need a microphone?
No.
Okay.
Just for fun, so my other thesis is about the Bohemians. So one of the things that I've learned, and it's occurred to me as I've been pursuing this film and like studying the group, is that in the 60s, the counterculture rejected the standard system with no money, right? But there's something about the FIRE community that they reject. They do the exact same thing in so many ways, but with $1 million in their bank account. And it's very, right? So how did that happen?
It's more sustainable.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
And we grew up in the 80s where greed was good. So
That's
No, I've gotten a few comments about that, actually. I aired an interview with a firefighter who saves half of her income, and she described her whole life story of just working gig jobs, making $10 an hour. And I got a lot of comments afterwards about people who were saying, like, that was awesome because in a lot of what I hear about when I encounter fire content is people patting, this is one of my readers said, it was people patting themselves on the back for doing the same things that I did, except I did it with $0 in my bank account. Like, I heard that from person after person after person. And so, I mean, I guess I don't know where I'm going with that other than to say that there is that subset of the people out there who are, who have not encountered fire, but they're living the gig life. They, after college, are going and becoming surf instructors, becoming beach bums, becoming, ski instructors in the winter, and then climbing instructors in the summer, like backpacking their way around. Yeah, like, the people here in the audience, right? And people do it for a while, and maybe they do it their whole lives, or maybe they do it for 5 years, and then they go back to grad school. But that's another part of the community that there's a lot of correlation there. It's just without the sustainable bank account.
Does anyone have anything they want to talk about that we haven't covered? Does anyone have any questions?
What's the Kickstarter?
What's the Kickstarter at?
what's the total right now?
I think we're 35% funded right now.
Oh.
It's exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I should mention really quickly about that is that for us, obviously we do want to raise that amount of money. That amount of money will let us pay our amazing editors and a bunch of other technical stuff. But the point is that the backers is actually what we're the most interested in. The amount of backers are so important because it's the optics. It's showing that there are people who are hungry for this content and that want to see it, and that helps us do our job getting it to the biggest platform that we can. So I just want to keep that in mind. So anything you can donate is great, and I'll never say that again.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
What's the call to action? What's the source of more information?
There is a call to action. We haven't sorted out exactly what that's going to be yet, but it has something to do with go visit everybody's blogs. Yeah.
It's a little bit hard to answer because we're not done yet.
Yeah.
That's why we're raising money.
We got a ways to go.
Well, thank you, everyone, for coming, and thank you all for listening and participating. And I feel so blessed to be up here and to be so welcomed by all of you. So it's been really great.
And thank you guys all for participating in the film. It's been a pleasure.